Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into three of history's most profound literary case studies on human resilience. We're talking about ancient texts that literally map out the darkest moments of the human experience, the narratives of Nehemiah, Esther, and Job. Look, these aren't just dusty old stories. They're actual blueprints for surviving the absolute worst that life can throw at you.
Here's our agenda for today. First, the three faces of adversity. Second, Nehemiah, rebuilding the wall. Third, Esther, saving a nation. Fourth, Job, the ultimate test. And finally, enduring lessons on resilience. It's our map for today's journey. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Three Faces of Adversity. These three distinct individuals face threats that span the entire spectrum of human crisis. We've got a communal threat, a massive political threat, and a deeply intimate personal threat.
Which brings us to a massive question, one I really want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. How do you rebuild a broken world? Seriously, whether it's your physical community, your political safety, or your own internal life, where do you even start when everything has been reduced to ashes?
Okay, let's dive into our first case study. Section 2, Nehemiah, rebuilding the wall. We meet Nehemiah in the citadel of Susa. Now, get this, he isn't a builder at all, he's a royal cupbearer. But when he hears that Jerusalem's walls are reduced to rubble, he weeps, he actually secures the king's permission, and he returns to rebuild. But the moment he begins, it is a total logistical nightmare. He's immediately mocked and threatened by local officials like Sanballat and Tobiah. And their laughter, it quickly escalates into real, armed military threats against the builders.
To counter this, Nehemiah displays some absolutely brilliant practical leadership. Look at these defense strategies. He stationed armed guards at the lowest, most exposed points. His builders literally carried materials in one hand and a weapon in the other. They were so hypervigilant they didn't even take off their clothes to sleep, which, must have smelled fantastic. But he also fought internal battles, halting predatory lending among his own people to handle social injustice at the exact same time. Talk about multitasking.
And because of this incredibly focused, hyper-vigilant leadership, the entire wall around Jerusalem was completed in just 52 days. That is astonishingly fast. The text actually notes that the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence when they saw the sheer speed of it. So why did it happen so fast? Well, because as Nehemiah recorded, the people worked with all their hearts.
All right, let's shift gears entirely here. Section 3, Esther, saving a nation. We're stepping into a tense, high-stakes political thriller now.
To really grasp the scale of the threat here, just think about this number: 127 provinces. King Xerxes' empire stretched from India to Kush. We are talking millions of square miles. In an absolute monarchy like this, a single decree from the king means immediate life or death for millions of people across the known world. It's a massive scale. Let's walk through this incredibly suspenseful timeline. It kicks off in the third year of Xerxes' reign when Queen Vashti is removed for refusing the king's command. This leads to a huge search for a new queen, and in year 7, Esther, a young Jewish woman hiding her nationality, is crowned. But the tension totally skyrockets in year 12. A deeply arrogant royal official named Haman gets absolutely enraged when Esther's cousin Mordecai refuses to bow to him. Haman doesn't just want to kill Mordecai, though. No. He casts the pur, or lot, and convinces the king to issue a decree to annihilate, kill, and destroy all the Jews in all 127 provinces on a single day. The clock is ticking loudly toward a state-sponsored genocide.
Now, what's really interesting here is how Mordecai responds to the crisis. He sends a message to Queen Esther, basically warning her that palace walls won't save her, just because she lives there. And he challenges her hidden identity with this iconic, incredibly powerful question. He asked if perhaps everything she has been through, her entire ascension to the throne, was entirely for such a time as this. He's directly calling her to leverage her immense privilege and risk her own life to save her community.
You have to understand, the law of the Persian court was unbelievably strict. Anyone who approached the king in the inner court without being summoned was put to death, period, unless the king extended his gold scepter. And Esther hadn't been summoned in 30 days. Yet, after asking her people to fast for 3 days and nights, she makes her choice. She says, "I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." It is just the ultimate emotional climax of her courage.
What follows is an absolute masterclass in political maneuvering by Esther, resulting in total poetic justice. Look at this incredible reversal of fortune. Haman had built a massive 75-foot gallows specifically to execute Mordecai. Instead, after Esther exposes Haman's plot to the king, Haman is hanged on his very own gallows. And that irrevocable decree to annihilate the Jews? It's countered by a new royal edict allowing the Jews to assemble, defend themselves, and overpower their enemies. This complete stunning reversal from mourning to joy is exactly why the Festival of Purim was established, and why it's celebrated to this very day.
Okay, let's take a breath and slow things down a bit. Section 4. Job, the ultimate test.
We are leaving the political thriller behind now and entering a deeply philosophical space, a true dark night of the soul. The text introduces us to Job, a man living in the land of Uz, who is described as incredibly wealthy and completely blameless. But then, a devastating cosmic wager takes place, and his hedge of protection is just completely removed. In a single horrifying day, marauders, fire from the sky, and a mighty wind destroy his flocks, his servants, and tragically, all 10 of his children. Soon after, he loses his health. We find him literally sitting in the ashes, using a broken piece of pottery to scrape the painful sores covering his skin. It's just unimaginable loss.
Job's initial reaction really anchors us in the raw, unfiltered grief of the human experience. He shaves his head, falls to the ground, and speaks these famous words, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away." It's an acknowledgement of total vulnerability. Soon after, 3 of his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, arrive. When they see his horrific state, they weep, tear their robes, and just sit in silence with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights because his suffering is simply too great for words. But, well, eventually, that silence breaks.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core philosophical conflict of the entire text. Job maintains his integrity. His lived experience is telling him, I am innocent, yet I am suffering. I want to take my case straight to the judge. But his friends, they operate on a strict, rigid theology of retribution. They argue in these increasingly hostile speeches, you suffer, therefore you must have sinned. If you would just repent, God would restore you. Job ends up calling them worthless physicians. It's a profound exploration of what happens when our neat, tidy formulas about how the universe works completely collide with the agonizing reality of unexplained personal tragedy.
Section 5. Enduring Lessons on Resilience. Let's see how this all builds into a unified understanding of human struggle.
So what does this all mean? Here's what you should really take away from this explainer. This is the Triad of resilience. Nehemiah shows us what it means to take swift, logistical action against communal threats, keeping a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other, all while demanding justice within your own ranks. Esther shows us how to leverage our positions and exhibit immense political courage against systemic evil, stepping into the inner court even when it means saying, if I perish, I perish. And Job? Job gives us a raw, honest framework for enduring catastrophic personal suffering when the answers are completely hidden from us, validating the pain of the innocent sufferer. Together, these verses offer us a pretty comprehensive map for navigating life's darkest moments.
Which leaves us with one final thought. The texts we've examined show us that adversity is inevitable, for sure. But the response? That is a choice. So whether it requires the sweat of Nehemiah, the bravery of Esther, or the agonizing endurance of Job, when faced with your own existential crisis, how will you choose to rebuild? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.